Services and Bissell Center for a deeper understanding of the outreach workers' experiences, challenges, and day-to-day operations. The project team also participated in ride-along job shadowing and facilitated workshops with park rangers and cleanup crews to understand their daily experiences and end-to-end processes. Next slide, please. As we now transition from the observation phase to the ideas phase, we start by getting organized with all the ideas for improvement that we heard. We heard nearly 50 unique ideas within the themes that you see on the screen. In analyzing the findings from all the engagement streams, we are keenly interested in themes that show up across all the groups as one avenue for prototypes and solutions that can meet multiple needs and interests. Basic needs, cleanliness, and improving respect and empathy in interactions were 3 common themes heard across all groups. In the ideas phase, we also communicate back to engagement participants with what we heard and our next steps. Opportunities for their continued participation will be made available throughout the implementation phase, particularly for any prototypes in which they would be directly impacted. Next slide, please. Before assessing the nearly 50 ideas for prototypes, we are confirming the amount of resourcing available from the encampment response partner organizations. To ensure we are successful, we need to ground our planning realistically in the time and commitment that can be invested for collaboration. And as for financial costs, there is a service package coming forward with the budget to establish a prototype development program. Next slide, please. The final 2 steps of the ideas phase is to assess and filter the nearly 50 ideas through a series of criteria that will help us establish what moves into the implementation phase. While our human-centered engagement helped us identify themes and ideas, we do need a process to assess and prioritize ideas, taking into consideration outcomes and business feasibility. Our first filter will be 5 of the community safety and well-being strategy principles. Next slide, please. Our second filter will be a mixture of outcome and feasibility criteria. Then, working collaboratively with the encampment response partners, we will use a decision-making matrix to determine which prototypes to advance. Next slide, please. We're happy to share the final report on the encampment resident lived experience engagement with you in November and to return next fall with an update on project process. Thank you. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have about this work.
Thank you. Now we will hear from our speakers. And I had Nadine Chalafou as in person. Is Nadine here? Or here online? Okay, well, I'll go through the speakers list. I won't ask administration to move seats then if we don't have anybody in person. You can just stay where you are. It helps a bit. So first is Nadine Chalafou. We'll circle back. Second is Christine Kowalchuk.
Hello, I am online.
Okay, so Christine Kowalchuk followed by Lynn Gannett. Go ahead, Ms. Kowalchuk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cartmel and all of City Council. I'm speaking today as the chair of the Edmonton River Valley Conservation Coalition. I also personally live a half block from Dawson Park, which figures prominently in this report. I'm concerned that ERVCC was not contacted as part of the engagement process, and I'm personally concerned that I was not contacted as a nearby resident, and that Riverdale Community League as a whole was not one of the community leagues contacted, even though this community borders Dawson Park. I'm concerned that the conclusions made about housed people's perspectives are skewed based on who was consulted in this engagement process. And I just heard in the presentation that the report was based on reaching out to neighbors who've made repeated complaints on this issue. ERVCC does not see homelessness or encampments as the problem. We see them as the result of problems, particularly ongoing racism and colonialism in our city. While ensuring everyone has access to safe, affordable housing obviously matters, the problems will not go away by simply moving people. In fact, as the report states, this often makes things worse as agencies lose track of individuals and as people become distressed by not being able to move their belongings. Furthermore, people are sometimes moved without being given options of where to move to. This was confirmed just last week when I spoke with 2 women sitting at the edge of Dawson Park as city and police trucks dismantled a camp. The women told me they simply had nowhere else to go. One of them also told me that the only time people living homeless steal is when they are forced to do so because the city and police have taken their belongings. The problems of homelessness and encampments will only be resolved through addressing the root causes. That is, through genuine truth and reconciliation and decolonization of minds, institutions, and systems. ERVCC supports 3 simultaneous pathways forward. Firstly, we strongly encourage support and funding for the exploration and development of prototypes as recommended by the report. This includes a prototype for Indigenous designed and led camps, perhaps one on each side of the river, and for River Valley stewardship work, perhaps in partnership with Downtown Proud, as part of the wraparound support for people who are recently housed. This program could enable a permanent repurposing of current funds away from fossil fuel and chemical intensive management of parks toward naturalization, which the city has committed to undertaking anyway. This kind of work would offer not only employment, but specifically therapeutic, care-based employment in nature, and would offer the city itself an opportunity to learn more ecological practices. Riverdale Community League has already worked with Downtown Proud to undertake this kind of partnership in the past. We also recommend a prototype not listed in the report for more public washrooms to be installed throughout downtown. Secondly, ERVCC urges the city to work with agencies to offer public education in communities such as Riverdale on homelessness and addictions. The city cannot rely on community leagues to do this work, as community leagues do not have the capacity, and even if they did, such an approach leads to division within the community. This public education is the city's responsibility. We would like to see agencies and community halls talking about homelessness and addictions and offering naloxone training, as well as covering articles on these topics in community league newsletters. This kind of public education is critical for the prototypes to receive the support they need in order to succeed. We would like to emphasize that this public education should include a reworking of the infographics included in today's report to include the perspectives of not only housed people, but also unhoused people. The need for this public education is clearly evident by the comment in the report by a housed person that they are suffering compassion fatigue and feel unsafe. Public education might help this person to move beyond presenting themselves as a victim toward imagining what it might mean to suffer from homelessness fatigue, or colonialism target fatigue, or racism target fatigue, and consider the dangers that being homeless and a target entail. Thirdly, we urge City Council to undertake more decolonial decision-making on all issues, including River Valley issues. For example, over $100,000 was spent on Dawson Park work this summer, without any community engagement that I know about, that involved clearing shrubbery from under bushes and weed whacking along the edge of forested areas, presumably to discourage camping. This work was unnecessary, caused ecological harm, and increased the area to now be maintained in the park. Promises that have been made for years to rewild sections of this park, which would decrease maintained space and hence costs over time, have gone nowhere. The money spent on Dawson Park this summer could have provided full-time therapeutic summer stewardship employment for at least half a dozen recently housed people and work to actually restore the park. While it's true that other levels of government have roles to play in addressing root causes behind homelessness, the city also has a critical part to play. ERVCC encourages the 3 pathways mentioned as a way toward beginning the healing that is so greatly needed in our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next we have Lynn Gannett, followed by Judith Gale.
Hello. Hello?
Hi there.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please
Hi
go
there.
ahead.
Good. Okay, great. Okay, well, good afternoon. My name is Lynn Gannett, and I am a settler Edmontonian living in the community of Riverdale, close to Dawson Park. I really appreciate living here and being able to so readily access this beautiful green space. My long, peaceful, and rejuvenating walks along the North Saskatchewan River are an important part of my life. I was interested, as a near neighbor to Dawson Park, to read the report on encampments in our city, and I would like to speak today in support of one of the suggestions which was made. I would like to express my support for the establishment of an Indigenous designed and led outdoor space, a space which could serve as an important first step in the journey towards being housed. I would also like to say that, as a longtime Riverdale resident, I would welcome the establishment of such a space in Dawson Park. I'm always aware, living in the River Valley, that this place has been a homeland for thousands of years. When I walk along the river and pass by a campsite, or talk with unhoused Indigenous neighbors I meet along the way, I think about the fact that this is their land through scores of generations, and that they have every right to be here. We as non-Indigenous community members need to have a strong work ethic when it comes to reconciliation. We need to listen, care, reach out, show respect, and make amends in whatever way we can. We are collectively responsible for the atrocities that have been committed through our institutions, and we need to do everything within our power to redress these wrongs. Collectively, as a community, we need to support the human rights of our Indigenous fellow citizens. In conclusion, I would like to voice my support for the establishment of an Indigenous designed and led space in Dawson Park, a space which would help to make things easier and safer for unhoused citizens, a space which would give dignity and support to people and which could be a part of their journey towards permanent and secure housing. Thank you very much for the opportunity to respond to this report.
Thank you. Next we have Judith Gale, followed by Alexandra Polwicki.
Hi, good day all, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter, of which I'm just listening to you guys has brought me to tears because these are really human beings that are unhoused and have so many problems. And instead of recognizing their human plight, the city, to me, has decided to villainize our brothers and sisters in the form of immediately the first responders are EPS and peace officers. Well, it's been my understanding from numerous lived experiences that peace officers are the root of all of this problem. And this is where the city, Mayor Sohi, you can definitely help, because you know, you're their boss. Peace officers are really, really awful to our brothers and sisters. They do kind of a home invasion, if you will, and sometimes they're not very nice. They're very physical and they're violent. And when our brothers and sisters object, then they're met with more browbeating, you know, and this kind of stuff. I really appreciate our ladies expressing that this is Indigenous land. And for our brothers and sisters to be treated so deplorably on their own land, it gives everybody else in society the ability to mistreat our brothers and sisters and not look at them as human beings. And we've got to steer away from data collecting. Our brothers and sisters are not interested in data processing or stuff like that. You know, we need to work on our brothers and sisters' psyche. We need to work on their soul, their spirit, and house them immediately. And housing first, you know, that's what we need. And so yeah, let me get back to my notes here, because that really made me cry, Christine, and the other lady, I'm sorry. Yeah, so we just, and the other thing too that we have to get out of is barring people out for life. I've seen it a number of times on ETS. ETS, they bar our brothers and sisters quite often from transportation, as well as shelters. They bar our brothers and sisters quite often from shelters as well. So, and I also need to say that we need to perhaps arm our citizens that want to help with proper training, human rights training, to, you know, how to deal, because our brothers and sisters have so many problems that we have to listen to them in a good way. And yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm just rambling on now. I just want to say that, yes, I agree with that Dawson Park. That would be a wonderful area for Indigenous people to gather and be safe together. And rent subsidies, I think rent supplements are definitely in order. And lived experience should trump all, especially when it comes to the unhoused, as we have to start listening to what their barriers are, what each and every individual barriers are, and their lived experiences and why. And hear it from a human point of view. So, yeah. Okay, thank you so much, you guys. And I think I'm probably well over my time.
Just on time. Thank you. Next we have Alexandra Polwicki, followed by Nadine Shalafu. Is Alexandra Polwicki with us? How about Nadine Shalafu?
Yes, I'm here.
Why don't you go ahead, Nadine? Yep, thank you.
Okay, sure. So I'm actually here on behalf of Edmonton Coalition on Housing and Homelessness. I'm the new chairperson. And we've actually been responding to this very process well before COVID. So it does break my heart to have to do this still and remain doing this. It's a tragedy. So over the past few years, ECHO has provided input to the city several times, like I said. Our most recent one was sent to you in April, informing you about the deplorable camping situations and letting people live without dignity. Once more, we appreciate the chance to share our view. We have described in the past our concerns with what is currently happening and our perspective that we could do better. As autumn sets in and the life becomes more difficult for people living in these perilous conditions, we wish today to make two major points. The first one, the current more of the same approach to this situation would be laughable for its absurdity if it did not involve the health and safety of human beings, many of them already in vulnerable circumstances. Two, it is an unnecessary situation that has become entrenched because of the dominant voice of legal and administrative perspectives that lack compassion for the people involved and conscience for the need for everyone to live in dignity and security. We realize that these are strong words and that some of you may be reaching defensively to them, but we urge you to be more open, to look at the reality and not only at the words in the reports before you. In many cultures, wisdom keepers urge us to put ourselves in place of others before making decisions. If you have not already done so, we urge you to be present the next time in an area of campers, when an area of campers is removed, to watch and listen as the whole process unfolds. To begin with, the people involved are often already in stress from the many health and safety risks they experience on a daily basis, and from having been displaced many times before. As with all of us, what they want is to create a place they can call home, a secure place, where those they love and those whom they want to offer hospitality can relax and be themselves. Without adequate housing, this is a very challenging option. Again, the city and the police personnel arrive with vehicles and equipment and tell them they have just a few minutes to grab everything they can and get out. As they try to do this around them, other shelters are being taken apart and everything thrown into trucks to be hauled away. Many of them don't get the chance to take their stuff with them because it's already been stolen from them. These are their belongings and they're being taken. This is their dignity and it's being taken. This year alone, millions of dollars have been spent destroying these shelters and moving the people, and there is absolutely no evidence of any improvement. There are as many or more people living in such shelter as there were when the year began. Good logic model plans require an outcome to be described that shows what will change for the shelter or for the better because of the plan. There has been a lot of activity, a lot of money spent, but no improvement. Within an hour of one of these displacements of people and destruction of shelter, people are setting up new shelter just a few blocks away. Talk to the staff who work at this task. They know scores of the people by name and re-encounter them week after week and do the same thing to their shelters week after week. The encampment of people to share realities about their lives that has taken place over the past few years, months, is useless. If it is then packaged by professional report writers in language that almost entirely disguises the painful and humiliating reality of life for people living in informal shelter, as has happened with the information provided to you, bland and neutral language will not change lived reality. The report before you does offer some carefully selected quotes that can be read beyond the surface to begin to give some insight into how awful things really are. But the reality you would see if you spent time with those living in these situations is far more difficult than the report lets on. More process and more reports while people suffer and die is heartbreaking. For another 6 months or more to go by before there is even testing of a prototype to deal with, this is unacceptable. Time after time in Canada alone, we can respond in hours or days to a stubborn catastrophe, yet this chronic disaster never seems to matter enough to receive more than token attention. It is well past time for that change. I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll now go to Alexandra Polwicki.
Hello, my name is Alexandra. I'm joining today to speak kind of from my experience, but also on behalf of the Bear Clan Patrol. And I'm not sure who here has heard of the Bear Clan Patrol, but it is an Indigenous-led organization that started in Winnipeg and has now kind of, you could call them chapters or groups across many of the bigger cities in Western Canada. And the goal of the Bear Clan Patrol is really to provide outreach to people who need any sort of kind of essentials, who are on the street, whether they be housed or unhoused. And how this kind of works in Edmonton is we have both financial donations and food, water, and clothing donations, as well as other kind of basics essentials that are given to us. And then there's a team of volunteers that takes all of these donations out onto the streets of Edmonton. We have 2 patrols, so one along White Ave and one in the north side there. And the goal really is to provide, gift out all these essentials to anybody who needs them. And so in this context, I go out once a week with this patrol, and we get to really have good conversations with people who are experiencing struggles and can't meet the basic needs like having food and water. And the topic of encampments and being able to have a safe space to spend the night is probably comes up on a weekly basis by at least multiple people. This is just a real struggle for people to find a place to be that is safe, and that they can return to time and time again. So I guess my goal in being here is mostly to kind of share that voice of how hard it can be to yeah, to not have a place to go to on a regular basis and to always be needing to find, you know, a new blanket to sleep under or something like that. Yeah, so just wanted to bring that voice into the room, and yeah, thank you for hearing this. Appreciate it.
Thank you. That concludes presentations from our speakers. We'll now go to questions of our speakers from council. I'll start with Councillor Jans. You exempted this item.
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank all of the speakers for coming and sharing with us today. I wanted to begin, maybe I'll ask the second speaker, I'm sorry I missed your name, who was speaking about the importance of an Indigenous space in Riverdale. Are they still with us?
Yes, I am still here.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, your name again?
Sorry. Am I still here?
Yeah, are you? I see your phone.
Okay, I don't have to press anything again. Yes, my name is Lynn Gannett, and I'm from Riverdale, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. So I see there's 3 goals in the encampment response process. First is connecting the people who are unhoused to resources and housing. Second is prevention of large-scale encampments. Third is safety and well-being of people impacted by encampments. I just wanted to unpack with you a bit about that second goal about large-scale encampments. I wanted to just hear your thoughts on that.
Well, you know, when it comes to what might happen in Dawson Park, I don't really feel that I would be an expert on that. Like, I think I would want to leave it up to the Indigenous community to kind of decide what it was that they felt that they needed there. I don't have any idea as to what the Indigenous designed and led outdoor space would be in Dawson Park, but I just think that it is an appropriate place for that space, and I think it is right. It would be right to have a space like that there. But I can't speak to what it would be about. You know, I don't know.
Right. Thank you. Could I ask maybe the same question to other speakers on the call, either guest Shalafu or Pulwiki, about large-scale encampments? Please.
I would like to express my views on that, if you will.
Oh, please. Yeah, is that Judy?
Judith,
Yeah.
Yeah, Judith with the Bear
Please.
Climb Patrol here. And thank you, Alex, for explaining what we do so eloquently. I've collected myself a little. I'm just so emotional over this, you guys, because this is real human beings we're talking about. And these are our brothers and sisters, mine in particular, you know? And so to have them re-traumatized and re-traumatized and re-traumatized is not good. And to warehouse our brothers and sisters, in my opinion, is not good either. You know, we're not the first city to ever tackle this issue. Here in Alberta, in particular, we have Medicine Hat that has boasted about how they have ended houselessness in their city. I suggest that, you know, when I looked into it, and how they did it was through assisted living programs where organizations bought buildings and then housed their organization out of that building to support the brothers and sisters that are living in that building. So I see that we should have no more than 50 people in a building, and then the proper supports, the wraparound supports, you know, that you guys talk about.
Right, it's a smaller scale, more decentralized opportunities. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, Indigenous people since time immemorial have always had camps, but they rarely have a big, humongous camp. Right? That's for getting together and stuff like that, because we recognize since time immemorial that, you know, living 5,000 in one building is too much. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess were you aware, Judith, that on Friday, City Council voted to provide an additional $7 million, maybe more, dollars to the Edmonton Police Service? And I was just wondering if I could get your feedback on that and where you would rather see those resources allocated.
Yeah, I was quite shocked about that because, quite honestly, We're approaching a dangerous corner where we're going to be a police state. And I don't believe that that's what needs to be done with our most vulnerable citizens. Our most vulnerable citizens don't need any more police or peace officers or security officers. Our vulnerable people are most, I'll even say fragile. Our most fragile human beings need love and protection, not policing and peace off. You know, I hate to call those peace officers because they
I'm
don't
sorry,
give anybody
I'm out of
peace.
time, Judith. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Sohi?
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here and sharing your thoughts. One of the things that a report identified is that there's a compassion fatigue out in the community, and I appreciate you being here and showing that compassion and reinforcing that that we as a community need to continue to work together to tackle these very complex issues. I don't know if some of you are aware, maybe I'll start with Ms. Kowalczyk, about the work that City Council has been doing in partnership with the province over the last year that resulted in significant investment in Edmonton on more 24-hour, 7 days shelter with wrapped around or with more support for health and mental support, as well as having some minimum standards implemented. Are you aware of some of those work that is being done to tackle some of the challenges?
Yeah, I am aware of that work, but clearly there is so much that still needs to be done, and there are huge gaps to be filled. And I guess I would like to repeat what Judith just said, that maybe the approach needs to be re-examined as well, so that rather than taking a kind of law enforcement approach, there is more of a human first, compassionate approach.
Yeah, and on that too, like I know Judith mentioned Medicine Hat, we are working toward that as well. We will have close to 500 new supportive housing units open this year and early next year, and luckily we got about $12 million from the province to provide wrapped around services in those units so people can get treatment and support, right? So I think we are on that path, but it's such a long, complex problem that has existed for decades, and also when houseless numbers doubled. People in Edmonton struggling with houselessness, their population gone up during pandemic. So I want to assure you all that your city council is really possessed with this problem, and we're working hard to find solutions, and we will continue to do so. But really appreciate you stressing the need and adding your voices to that. Appreciate it.
If I could just add one last point, Mayor Sohi, and that's really encouraging council to look at ways in which the River Valley is managed, and look for opportunities there where we are not just tackling a bunch of seemingly unrelated problems and dealing with consequences, but rather taking a more holistic approach where we are bringing some of these issues together and dealing with them in, for lack of a better term, a kind of permaculture way, in which people who are needing employment and needing that therapeutic employment in nature are working to, in the River Valley, undertaking naturalization and things. It was really distressing to see, this sort of constant weed whacking and cutting of trees in Dawson Park this summer, when that money could have gone to people undertaking restoration work in Dawson Park and benefiting from it themselves. So I think there's an opportunity to sort of bring issues together more as well.
No, thank you for sharing that idea with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Wright.
Thank you very much. And Professor Kowalczyk, I just want to go back to you because I was interested in that sort of the therapeutic benefit of that River Valley stewardship. And I'm just wondering if maybe you could provide some examples or ideas as to how that would sort of roll out.
Yeah, well, I do recall this being undertaken already in the past by the Riverdale Community League. A few years ago, it was there was a lot of construction garbage, including little bits of styrofoam that had blown down into the river valley from a development project at the top of Bank. And so we worked with our councillor at the time and Downtown Proud to hire people to come into the river valley and undertake stewardship work there. And we met with them, and they were really happy to be doing that work. They appreciated being in nature. They loved being in the river valley and being paid. And it just seems like there are so many opportunities for that work to be ongoing, not just as a kind of reaction to a mess from a construction project, but undertaking naturalization work in Dawson Park and working to lower the maintenance costs of the park by hand pulling of weeds, restoration, planting of trees, and even just having more kind of eyes on the park, more people in the park who are also doing some outreach work because they've got that experience, that firsthand experience themselves. So I think, again, as someone else responded to another question, I think it would make most sense for the people with that experience, that lived experience, and the agencies themselves to work out the details, but we have seen it work already in Dawson Park.
Okay, thank you. And just you said more eyes sort of on the park. I'm just thinking of like downtown businesses and that, saying that the more activity makes it safer. So would the more eyes in the park make it safer as well, do you think?
Absolutely. And just having, eyes that are specifically coming from a place of care and compassion. And I think that would be a major benefit in the park. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Is it all right if I add something to Christine's point?
Sure, I have 2.5 minutes left, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to say that if some of that restoration work could also lead to, I don't even know how to say this, but like if they were Saskatoon berries, for example, and the people who planted them could then come back and harvest berries a couple years later, I think that would have a lot of meaning, and also maybe address some of the like food security issues. You can go and pick berries, and there's a lot of meaning in kind of engaging with berry plants, especially if you planted them and took care of them. So that's all I wanted to add.
Awesome, thank you. Did anybody else want to comment?
Yeah, I could definitely see it. And then we could also grow medicine as well. And, it would be a beautiful, beautiful addition to feeding our spirit and our soul of the Indigenous people on their own land.
Awesome.
Yes, that sounds so good to me too.
Great suggestions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson.
Yes, thank you. And thanks so much to our speakers for the great ideas and insights that you've shared today. Maybe to Ms. Gale or Ms. Shalafu, one of the most persistent, I think myths that I hear is people who are in encampments are choosing that. They don't want to be housed. The evidence in the report that we have before us suggests that that's not the case, that the vast majority of people would choose, adequate and appropriate housing over being in encampments. Is that something that you also see and experience in the interactions and relationships that you have?
If I can, yeah, absolutely. I myself, let me just tell you right now, I myself was homeless 9 years ago, and I was placed in a house with no wraparound services, no supports. I nearly ended up back on the street within the first year, and then again within the first 5 years. So it's not just about homelessness, and it's not a choice. I did not have a choice to become homeless. I did not have a choice to be poor and on income support. These are things that happened to me. So these people are not choosing. And if they are choosing, it's because the alternative is not promising. So how do you make that more promising? You need to add those additional wraparound services. You need to give that support. You're spending more per person to be homeless every day than what you could be spending housing them and giving them those supports. And
Thanks.
saving money in the long run.
Yeah, thank you so much. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I can respond to that as well. I know that the people that we serve, I always ask them, you know, weekly almost, if I had an apartment for you tomorrow, would you go? And everybody resoundingly says yes. And guess what? It doesn't have to be an apartment. It could be just a room, cockroach free, you know? And this is what we hear constantly. Nobody wants to be unhoused. It's not a choice. It's a circumstance of society, unfortunately, of where you are in society.
Great. Thank you so much. And I think too that even when people maybe are offered that apartment or that room, there's still maybe things about those spaces that aren't meeting their needs. Again, you know, Ms. Shalafu, you're talking about the lack of support, the lack of community. So again, I think that's what this person was offered an apartment, they didn't take it. But again, there are those structural reasons why they're not staying there.
Yes, and that's just it. We're not housing them in the right housing, in the appropriate housing, in their accessible and inclusive housing. So if you're putting someone who's on income support into a near market housing, they're not going to survive.
Yeah.
So those all need to be taken into perspective.
Great. Thank you. And just wondering if the two of you again, or anyone else, but just wanting to understand as well, you know, one of the investments that we made at the end of last year was into outreach teams, and particularly an Indigenous-led outreach team, which I believe is, you know, starting to get off the ground. Just wanted to get your thoughts on the value of having outreach teams going to encampments, visiting folks, helping connect them to services. Is that something that you've seen as working well, or are there other approaches you think would be more appropriate and effective?
It works better than police.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunately, you know, I just encountered this situation where I was filming de-encampment, they call it, and I was going to help one of my brothers pack up, because he was by himself, pack up his tent. And they told me that if I came, the peace officers told me that if I came on the property, they were going to ticket me with trespassing. They would not allow any mutual aid groups. But what we did do was we came back with coffee and food and the necessities of life. And we took care of our brothers and sisters on the public sidewalk. And that helped them out, that helped the transition, and it kind of lessened the trauma, in my opinion. So if they want to go into encampments and stuff, you know, do it with a mutual aid group.
Great.
You know,
well, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm out of time, but really appreciate the responses. And again, to all of our speakers for being here today. I'm sorry to get to everyone, but really appreciate you coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe I'll go back to Nadine, because you've had lived experience and you're here with us today. I have also heard, even from Indigenous housing advocates, you know, there are some people who would prefer not to be housed. But that is such a small outlier, isn't it? Like a tiny percentage.
It's tiny, but those who refuse, it's because of how they're going to be housed. They know what the process is. Indigenous people are not going to be housed in homes that they can practice their culture. They're not going to be able to do traditional things. They're not going to have that inclusiveness, that acceptance. They're going to be pushed. You can't smudge in a lot of these places unless you force them on religious beliefs, which is a sad fact. So Indigenous people won't have that community. They won't have that ability to want to socialize or even be social with people. These things happen because of no proper housing. And there's such a limited amount of Indigenous housing to provide that for them.
Thank you. I think someone's got their mic on. It's causing a lot of feedback. Maybe if you're on the phone or something, I don't know, someone's got their mic on. Madam Clerk, you might want to look into that. Okay, so I think that narrative, though, gives comfort to people who do nothing or want to do nothing, because they're like, oh, no one wants to be housed anyway. And I think you address that. But the next question is, we look at this housing as a tragedy and an unavoidable tragedy, and oh boy, what are we going to do about it? But the roots here are not by mistake, are they, Nadine? I mean, you know your family history.
Yes, absolutely. They're not. I mean, Indigenous people have been displaced and left homeless for over 4 centuries. That's the reality of it, and it's been passed down. But my question to the city council is, in 1996, the very last provision to keep people from being homeless was removed. For 50 years prior to that, we had 0 homeless because we cared about them, because we cared about our impoverished. We wanted to keep them healthy and safe. Why are we not doing that now?
Yeah, so, yeah, exactly. A very good point. So it's been government policy that has caused poverty and people to be homeless in their own homeland,
Yes,
is what you're saying.
absolutely.
So here we are as a municipal government, the lowest order of government with the least amount of funds and legislative authority, trying to tackle this problem because we see it in our streets, but these are Alberta's streets. These are Canada's streets. Do you feel
They
that
are.
Canada and Alberta, the governments, are doing enough to assist Edmonton, who has the least amount of budget, in tackling the issues that ostensibly they created through policy?
No, no. But why are the 4 buildings that the city's building for affordable housing not finished yet? Because those are homes for people that could be possibility. It doesn't take this long. It doesn't take 3 years to build them.
Yeah, well, and that's a good question. And it's about the wraparound services I think that you're talking about. Is that, I mean, I'll put it to you this way, because maybe there's a middle ground here that is not being contemplated just because of the lack of money. But to build that housing gives us the ability to offer those wraparound services. We could set up encampments like temporary shelters, like oil company shelters right away, but we can't get the staff in because that's a provincial responsibility. So what can we do, in your opinion, as a city to accelerate this, understanding these limitations? And where is the voice of the people? You come out to this because you've got an opportunity. Where's the opportunity for people to talk to their provincial government and their federal government to fast track these things?
To be supported by the city council at their meetings, to be supported at information sessions, town halls with the MPs and the MLAs.
Yeah.
Need your support physically.
Because I don't think the public understands this narrative. They don't get all this information. And do you think that city council should be louder about it?
Yeah.
I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tang.
Thank you, Councillor Carmel, and thanks to everybody who took your time and come forward to speak. Maybe I'll continue there with Nadine. I really, really appreciated what you said about the lack of alternatives that is forcing people, quote unquote, choosing to stay outside because the alternative is so bad. And I was wondering if you had a chance to take a look at the report we were discussing this morning on the housing needs assessment and the housing strategy. And I don't know if ECHO has seen that as well and had your discussion about it. And do you see a way forward there in terms of creating better alternatives so that people don't have to choose outdoors over, indoors, and a roof over their head, and a community where they feel they belong and where they have a home. Oh, Nadine, you're on mute.
Sorry, in all honesty, we actually had our general meeting this morning, so I just briefly scanned through it. But I know exactly where ECHO stands on this, and it's still not enough. It's not, you're trying to, you want to go out and reinvent the wheel when it's already been made, basically. The information, the data, it's all out there already. You have the allies in groups like ECHO, like other housing industries or organizations, like Bent Arrow, like Right to Housing. All of these places have that information for you. Get them in a room together and hash it out, because I can guarantee you'll have solutions, not only solutions, but the information on how to get this, how to do it, how to implement it, and how to sustain it. Mm-hmm. It's there. It's just, so writing out the strategy to me is just delaying the efforts.
And so you feel currently that space for all the players to come together to hash it out isn't quite there yet?
No, and I'm questioning why not. Why are we not all at one table talking about this right now instead of just doing what we're doing right now?
And at those tables, do you also see the folks who are directly impacted, those who are, say, camping out or, struggling with housing? Do you see those folks having a role at that table too?
Well, if they didn't, then why are you trying to make houses for them? Yeah. You need their input. That's just common sense. And these organizations, I can guarantee you, would bring at least one or two people of lived experience or living experience to that table with them.
Great, thank you. Judith, are you still there?
Yeah, I am. Sorry, I had to rejoin. My phone was dying. Didn't know these
worries.
Things took so long.
No worries. I had a question just on the last thing you said, just in terms of the response piece. You said, get the mutual aids involved, and I was wondering if you can elaborate on that, and what does that look like to you? Judith? You're on mute.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, sorry. What that looks like to me is community taking care of community without a police presence, without security presence, without peace officer presence. A community can always take care of community. Look at the lovely community of Riverdale coming up with this fantastic, wonderful idea. This is what we do. And like Nadine says, we do have to get everybody in the community together at the same table. It's nonsensical, right? To be talking here and there. It's like we're in silos, and we don't want to operate in silos any longer. We all need to be on the same playing level, so that we can all exchange ideas and learn from one another in a good way,
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, I appreciate that answer, and I think, and also I wasn't sure if you were, if you saw the housing report that was for discussion earlier today, but there was quite a bit of stories about organic communities and communities supporting one another that certainly I resonate with, and resonating with what you're saying. But again, thank you all for sharing that. I appreciate the responses.
Well, thank you, Councillor, for bringing it up. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that concludes questions of our speakers, just to see if there's anybody else that has anything to offer. Okay, not seeing anybody. Then thank you very much again for joining us today and offering your perspectives. It's very much appreciated, and thank you for your patience in getting to this item today. So now we'll turn to questions of administration. Councillor Jans is not with us at the moment, so I'll wait for somebody to click on. Councillor Tang.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, probably have a few more rounds on this one too. But first, I just want to say kudos on this work. You know, I was actually quite happy to see the team pursuing the human-centered design approach, which is a very particular methodology. And, you know, there's a number of things in here: the interviews, the ethnography, the personas, the surveys, and the stakeholder engagement, and as well as a number of outputs that is, you know, that follows the human-centered design principles. I guess I was, you know, that ethnography piece, which is that lived stories and living experiences, it's not ready yet. It won't be ready until November, right? Why didn't you postpone this report, given how much time we just discussed earlier, how much work that goes into a report? Why don't you postpone that until you had that information?
Councillor Tang, it's because when this motion was being made, there was a discussion on timelines, and it was felt by committee at the time that they wanted an update prior to the budget deliberations. So that's why we didn't postpone it, to ensure that we could at least provide some update prior to the budget.
Gotcha. And then the budget that is contemplated right now in the motion, in the report, you're thinking of a package during November deliberation that will include much of the response team work, am I right? And a portion of that will be dedicated to the prototypes, even though we don't know what the feasibility of some of those prototypes and which ones to really pursue.
That's correct, Councillor Tang, because administration has prepared a service package that includes options for council to augment the existing encampment response, so increasing resources on the outreach and parks rangers and park side. And built into that package is also a small budget for prototype development. We don't know which prototypes we will be prototyping at this point, but we do know that we are committed to continuous improvement of the encampment response, and so there's a small amount of resources, a relatively small amount of resources in that package as well, to be able to fund ongoing improvement work through prototyping.
And so for the encampment response this year, that was the $860,000 that was approved back in 2021 budget delivery, the fall budget period, right? And I'm curious how much of that budget has been spent on response. And is that the majority of that on kind of the multidisciplinary team, the response approach that we see on a day-to-day basis? Because in the report, it also, you know, the frontline workers are saying there's not enough resource. I'm wondering, at what point would this effort be considered adequately resourced? And at what point do we consider encampment response team to be successful? Is it about no more encampments, or is it about something else?
I mean, to answer the question on the 868 or whatever it was, that was primarily spent on increased parks staff. Okay. They hired 14, I believe it was 14 extra FTEs, and as well as some increased resources on the parks ranger side. Although I do believe that we funded a couple positions at on the outreach side as well, one on outreach and one on a housing worker for Bissell, to also provide additional resources for that response.
Okay, and I guess to my question about like what would be adequately what would adequate resource mean and look like? Is it more of the same types of people, types of roles, more teams, just more? I mean, I'm just being reminded of one of the speakers saying, you know, more of the same isn't going to cut it. But I'm also hearing that this is what people, you know, the folks frontline are asking.
Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, I don't think that there's a very easy answer to that. I think we are in a situation that is ever evolving. We're in a situation that we are always learning from, and how to adapt and how to integrate. And the encampment response is part of a large housing spectrum, and changes in one area in the spectrum can have positive or negative impacts on the rest of the spectrum, including encampments. So, you know, I'm not sure that we can say this is the silver bullet, the answer that we are always looking for. I think this is being committed to ongoing listening, pivoting, improving, and trying to move that sort of arc of wellness towards one in which we meet the 3 goals that are identified in the encampment strategy, so that individuals impacted by encampments themselves as well as neighbors are safe and secure and have the resources they need to thrive in the city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Sohi.
So just to follow up on that, the supportive housing units that we are bringing on board, what is the status now? How many will we have by the end of the year?
So 4 of the 5 have reached substantial completion, and 2 of them have been transferred to Homeward Trust. The other 2 are expected to be transferred very shortly. They're just finishing the deficiency review process. And then the last one is slated for substantial completion at the end of October. So by the end of the year, all 5 should have transferred officially
And
to Homeward
that's
Trust.
how many units altogether?
That'll be 210 units.
200 in all of those?
In the 5, yeah. And then
And
there's also the hotel,
Yeah.
which is additional units in the 3 hotels.
And when are they scheduled to be?
Prairie Manor has opened and has started moving people in, or I think the first level is now occupied, and they're working on the levels above. And then Bissell has taken, or there's also, Naganan, it's still in construction. The Sands Hotel is still underway construction process. I'm not sure on the completion deadline, but I can get that for you. It's in sometime later this year.
So altogether close to 500 units, or?
446, I think, was the number. Yeah, across the RHI.
So that will, hopefully that will make a difference in having less people sleeping rough.
Yes, that's the goal with the supportive housing units, is to be accessible to people sleeping unsheltered.
Yeah.
And if I can just also respond that we can never do this fast enough. It took us 1.5 years through a pandemic to get where we got to, and I just do want to thank all the teams who really leaned in to get us where we are. Supply chain has also been another problem for us.
No, I appreciate that absolutely, because it wasn't easy to bring these new units on board as quickly as possible, but they'll be here now. You heard from one of the members of the public that not everyone is on the table to talk about these issues. So who's convening that table and who's missing from the table?
I know that the specific example that was given, that community member might not have been aware that the Riverdale was invited and did attend on June 7th, but to the larger point of, have we been expansive enough in our invitations? We can always be more inclusive, and we can go back and review who has been invited and make sure that we are being as inclusive as possible.
Okay. On the, and thank you for the report, and thank you for the engagement. Actually, it was I was very pleased with how much consultation was done and involvement of particularly those who are living rough. You identified just basic things that people need: access to washroom, right? Access to a shower, access to some clean clothing, just fire to stay warm, right? I know the solutions are not simple to these basic necessities. I know you have done a lot of work in engaging with learning from other areas. Like, I'm even struggling to compose this question in a way. Like, why can't we do some basic necessities for people that they have a little bit dignity?
Thanks for the question, Mayor. So I think in recent years, we have made considerable progress towards some of the more consistent provision of these essentials. Some examples of that would be like the public washroom strategy that council's approved. All through COVID, there was, and it continues to this day, we've continued this ongoing operational additional public washroom facilities in and around areas where we know people are staying unsheltered in particular. Yeah. So we have made some progress with respect to public washrooms. Some other examples of access to showers and hygiene, that's top of mind for us too. That's why we monitor day shelter capacity constantly and are looking at where gaps might exist. The financial support that council recently approved for the Bissell Centre, expanding day services, all of that hour expansion is about making those services more accessible to folks. Yeah. In an ongoing way.
It's not a criticism. Yeah. I know you're working hard. Please don't take it that way. Just find so frustrating that in a wealthiest community that we just can't provide basic necessities for the most struggling. So it's part of that frustration. So what is the next step? I know I'm probably come for my next second round because I'm basically out of time. We'll come back to that. Okay.
Yeah, we're trying to be pretty reasonable. It's committee, not council, but thank you. That's kind of you. Well, I'll take my turn. So, yeah, I'm going to ask these questions anyway, knowing that there might be a bit of pushback on this. But there's an enormity of inputs, not just in this room, not just from administration, but from others. And it feels like almost an oversimplification to me to say that, you know, if we just threw out some washrooms and some showers, we would solve most of these problems. Is that fair? I mean, perhaps there's a subset of that, but is that fair to say that it's as simple as that?
Well, I think that those solutions are important for addressing the symptoms of the underlying problem, but the root cause of the problem is obviously homelessness, and that's not going to be solved by more public washrooms.
So first of all, part of the solution set to that symptom is the minimum standards for shelters, because that's usually the first solution set for those that are living rough is to a shelter. Typically, yes? Yeah. Unless, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yes, that's correct. And we are starting to see some progress as a result of our efforts and the efforts of our partners. You know, recently when the government of Alberta made the announcement related to homelessness a week or so ago, part of that included funding for a service hub at Hope Mission, which will expand the number and types of services that are offered. And also there was funding to ensure that those facilities all can operate 24/7, which again, it goes towards that question of expanding access to services. We know there are people that we know a lot of people do access services at Home Mission, even if they're not sleeping there overnight. They'll access showers or washrooms in the shelter. Yeah,
and having the 24/7 aspect of that helps that immensely. But I'm reminded of pre-COVID. Actually, I think this was when we opened up the field house at Commonwealth Stadium, and we did it just a little bit differently, where the shelters are. And I do not want to sound overly critical. I know they're offering a service that otherwise isn't there. But it wasn't mats on floors, and it wasn't separation of you from your partner or your pet or your stuff. We tried to provide just a little bit of dignity in that temporary space. Am I right on that?
Yes, that's correct. It was a city-run facility. It was only open during extreme periods, but when it was open, we worked really hard to remove as many of the identified barriers that we had identified from previous experience with people with lived experience. So we've done, you know, this isn't a new thing. We often engage people with lived experience when it comes to any strategies that the city is responsible for around homelessness, and that's what ultimately led to the creation of the shelter standards, which is what led to us operating it differently.
That seemed to have more uptake than the regular shelters, or at least more positive feedback from those we're trying to serve. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, same thing with Tippinawa too. We do evaluations of these activations, and we have heard positive feedback about aspects of the way that those services were administered relative to other facilities that might be available.
Right. So you said a moment ago, Ms. Gajenner, that the root cause is let's say houselessness. But what's the root cause of houselessness? And so do we need a further examination of that? And we get into now some of the cultural situations we have, concerns we have, and this is where my vocabulary begins to fail me. But there's a considerable number of people that would say the root cause of this is drug addiction. And so is there, and not universally, never necessarily, but is there at least a part of this problem that is rooted in drug addiction and the lack of opportunity to recover from that addiction, that makes it difficult for those to be in housing situations and sort of adapt to the rules, if you will, that leads to further complexity of problems?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fair to say that addiction and mental health issues is an underlying cause of homelessness. There's no question. And supporting people with access to addiction and mental health supports is a good strategy for alleviating homelessness prevention or alleviating homelessness for people experiencing it. But there are a number of other factors that would contribute as well too, right? And part of it is maybe, like economic circumstances. There's also people who
no doubt
can work full time but may not be able to afford market rent. Given on the size of the family, there's historic trauma, as we know, for folks who, contributes to their inability to thrive or to financially earn sufficient income to afford housing as well.
Yeah, my time is up. I would like to continue that thread, and it's the disjointedness of the committee conversation. However, I'll go now to Councillor Stevenson. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Wright. My apologies.
Thank you. On that same line then, could the root cause of addiction also be the mental health or intergenerational trauma as well? So we just keep digging deeper and deeper. Okay. And even if we do provide minimum shelter standards, that's not necessarily going to entice all people to want to enter those shelters, correct? There's other concerns?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so things like their own safety and security, is that right?
I'm sure some people feel more or less comfortable in the shelter spaces that are available to them. And so some might choose not to use shelter because they're not comfortable. That's certainly a factor.
Okay. And then I'm just going back to some of the data that was provided as far as the 311 complaints, how it has increased over the past couple of years. I'm just wondering how many of those related to the same location, and maybe it was just a matter of resolution or immediate response wasn't there.
I would have to ask Mr. Wilson, who's online, just to speak to unique complaints versus overall complaints.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor. So we don't actually identify complaints and compare for specific isolated locations. We look at gross numbers year over year. We do look at specific hotspots and neighborhoods. And we do look at how our numbers are changing over year to year. So for an example, where we are right now in 2022, we are approximately 30% higher than we have been in previous years for the number of complaints that we've received. Now, some of these complaints are about the same locations. We often have duplicate complaints. So one of the tasks that we take on is to sift through those complaints and reduce any duplicate complaints so we can understand what the real numbers are. And that enables us to really focus in on where the challenges are and to do our inspections in a timed way so we can be as efficient as possible.
And could that also be the result of, dismantling an encampment and having people move and then dismantling that one and then they move back to that original spot as well? So really not, not helping the people find places to find shelter, but just moving them around.
Yeah, that is one of the challenges that the officers encounter all the time, and it's a frustration for them as well. They would love to see the people, many of which they get to know on a first-name basis. They would love to see them get successful into housing solutions. Absolutely, they would like to see that. These are compassionate officers that take their job very seriously and try to approach it with empathy. We also take a risk-based approach. And yes, we do see that oftentimes we will close a camp, perhaps because of a fire risk or explosions or other risks that are very real, both to the occupants of the encampment themselves and to the surrounding community. But yes, oftentimes we will close an encampment, we'll move people along, we'll give them as much notice as possible. We also connect them with outreach services. But then, yes, we do see them set up camp elsewhere and sometimes even return to that very same spot.
Okay,
that is a challenge and a frustration.
Thank you. I'm just cognizant of my time, so thank you for clarifying that. And yes, with it taking 59 days to try to find shelter for someone, I'm sure they have to move around a few times. I'm just also wondering about the insight surveys that was done where it indicated people were expressed an increase in incidents. Was there any other information garnered, like solutions? Did respondents, were any questions asked of respondents as far as, do we need to have more funding for this? Did residents show a care and compassion? I'm just wondering, is there anybody from communications online that could answer that?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Wright. I can answer that question. We didn't ask for any detailed information on the insight survey. The intention was really just to set a baseline of perception of safety and perception of encampments before going into the prototype phase, but certainly we could do follow-up surveys where we could dig deeper.
So basically it was just the one question asked if people noticed an increase?
Essentially,
Okay.
yes.
And then you've indicated data from different neighborhoods. Was that question also asked about what neighborhood they were from?
We were able to ask their postal code, as we normally can do on Insights, and then we were able to break it out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think what I've been struggling with, great report, really appreciate all the work that went into it. I think what I struggle with, and I think which has come through today, is that an encampment response is a bit of a misnomer, and that truly the only real and adequate response to encampments is housing. And I think that, you know, I really appreciated the clarity of the report in terms of highlighting that, again, encampment response teams are not adequately resourced to address the volume of encampments or the complexity of health and security challenges faced by encampment residents. I think that demoralization for staff working there, not to take away again from the extremely real impacts that residents of encampments are facing as well, but that aspect of the dynamic being there as well. So I did want to pick up on some comments. I think there's been great strides. I really value the work that's been done to reduce the number of high-risk encampment classifications, providing that additional time for outreach to connect with folks. But I did hear some concerns just around, again, maybe more of the enforcement involvement, some less than ideal practices in terms of treating people with dignity and respect. So I know that peace officers are carefully considered for the positions, being on the encampment response teams, but just wondering what sort of other training opportunities or requirements there may be for city staff who are peace officers on those encampment response teams.
Yes, we do have a number of other training activities that we engage in. And so the Native Counselling Services Alberta has actually involved in delivering compassion-based services to our officers and training them to assist them in ensuring that when they are engaging with folks, they're doing it in a way that's empathetic, as compassionate, as trauma-informed as well. And we've just embarked. Oh, sorry, Councillor, go ahead.
I was just saying, and that would be required training and ongoing training that they would have access to?
Yes, it is. And we've just started a second round of compassion to action training as well, which is a secondary course that all of our frontline peace officers and our leadership are taking as well.
Great. Really appreciate hearing that and appreciate the work. Are there opportunities for discussion forums, connection points between some of our city staff and mutual aid groups to share more of that direct learning as well, potentially?
Councillor Stevenson, my colleague Chelsea Horlock, her in our social development branch convenes, there's a team member in her team who convenes somewhat regular meetings with mutual aid groups to discuss issues of common concern and how we can work better together.
Yeah, and are they able to meet directly with the peace officers?
I'm not sure if that's happened yet, but that would be something we could facilitate for sure.
Right. Perfect. Really appreciate that. I do just want to touch on it, and again, this gets really, I appreciate the challenges, so please understand that I know the broader context here. But again, I think it's so important that your data show that the vast majority of people are not making any choice to be in encampments, that they'd much rather be in adequate and affordable housing. And I appreciate the work that's done every winter to come up with a winter strategy. But I think what I'm really hearing is that the summer need is no less, that just because there isn't freezing weather, there is every other terrible thing about being outdoors in all seasons, also recognizing the extreme weather that we see increasingly during our summers. So is there a way that we can bring that same urgency to our winter shelter strategy to all seasons, recognizing that encampments just in no way are a solution or an adequate shelter for Edmontonians living in our city?
Our advocacy continues with the Government of Alberta to increase the number of shelter spaces, understanding that it is a spectrum. You know, so we've got the temporary shelters, and we want to move people through to successfully find housing and homing that makes them comfortable and safe.
Yeah, well, I think it's just that urgency in terms of, you know, we bump up in winter, and are there ways where we just start to think and recognize that we just need to stay at that level all year round?
I think Councillor Stevenson that there's certainly an increasing appreciation on the part of our partners at the Government of Alberta that Edmonton does not have sufficient shelter capacity year round, and so we do bump up with temporary spaces to meet the acute and immediate needs that we see right now. But for certainly the longer term goal is to increase capacity to ensure that there's more available ongoing spaces overall.
Great, thanks so much. I'll come around for a few more.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this whole conversation is somewhat disturbing to me. What keeps popping into my mind is that we talk about these issues the way we talk about coyotes. And moving them around, scaring them off, making accommodations, trying to explain to the public why there's coyotes, why there's homeless. And so I guess, so my question here is rooted in an historical situation where Métis people were called the road allowance people because the only place they were actually legally allowed to stay was on the sides of the roads. And the historic aspect of moving reserves away from municipalities because as municipalities grew, it got too uncomfortable to be near Indigenous communities. So with that in mind, I'm just wondering, is there a difference from your perspective in how we talk about these things here in committee and at council and in rooms compared to the experience that our teams have talking with people in the encampments, in the space, face to face?
I mean, certainly, I'll take a crack at this, Councillor Paquette. I think certainly there's when we're in a committee room, often, and most often probably from a government perspective, we look at things from a system perspective. So we look at it from, 50,000 feet or 40,000 feet. When we're talking about the issue face-to-face, our frontline staff with people experiencing homelessness, obviously that conversation is a lot more, it is different. I think that's where there's a more increased opportunity for the sort of that human-centered or interpersonal interaction. And that's ultimately the goal of this report, was to bring more of that perspective in and more of the dimensions of those types of interactions and conversations and what it actually looks like at the ground level, because it's easy to abstract the problem into spaces or units. But we can lose the voice in the actual real impacts of homelessness on communities and the people experiencing it if we don't work to bring their voices to the table, and this report is, an attempt to continue to do that. And going forward, I hope that we'll be able to do that more.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the work you're doing. My concern isn't you, because I think your team is doing an incredible job. It's just this emotional detachment that makes it very awkward. Okay, so then the other question is, Councillor Carmel brought up a very good point about treating underlying causes, and then Councillor Wright made an excellent point about what about the underlying causes below that. And so if we're not treating the ultimate underlying causes of greed, racism, and theft, and intentional destruction of peoples and genocide, are we going to be able to fix this, or are we just going to keep having these conversations over and over again?
I think that the response to any complex problem requires small and large actions over time. And when we talk about folks who are living in encampments, as we discussed earlier, the majority are experiencing health challenges like addiction, substance use, trauma, medical illnesses, mental health issues.
Yeah, I just got to pause there for a second. None of that happens without pain.
Certainly. I agree with you 100%. And so I think that framing this discussion as all or nothing, perfection or nothing, it doesn't help us to progress, would be my opinion. And I think that there's a way in which I think our teams are trying to very respectfully examine prototypes, different options to get better.
Can I ask you a question? Is it complex because we don't have enough money? Or is it, because really when it comes down to it, we know what needs to happen. People need to be housed and they need to be healed. And is there complexity in that? Sure. But I worry that we use the word complexity to create some psychological barriers to give us comfort for inaction. And I don't think you're trying to do that, but I mean, your response on that would be helpful, I think.
Gosh, I hope that the work that we're doing isn't making you feel like we are happy to be inactive. That is certainly not our intention.
Not for you, but for other people who hear it. Oh, it's so complex. Well, who's going to solve it? I know that you're trying to, but decision makers probably need to hear these things. Anyway, I'm out of time. Thank you.
Councillor Salvador.
Thank you. Just clarifying, Councillor Jans as a committee member is on the list.
We're just at the break, so we'll just
go
ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, so just a few questions. I really appreciated our speakers coming out today. And I wanted to ask about something that was brought up around, actually working with mutual aid groups when we're going out to encampments, recognizing that a lot of the leaders who are part of mutual aid groups have existing relationships with folks who may be living rough. Wondering what work is being done in that space. If you could elaborate on that a little bit, please.
I think the conversation needs to be had. As mentioned earlier, one of our teams is talking with some of the mutual aid organizations to better understand how we, in the city, and the structures and systems that we have in place, how we can work together to be effective and for the benefit of the citizens. So more work to be done there.
Okay, yeah, and I think just reflecting on, that a lot of mutual aid organizations are already, making regular contact with folks, and I just feel like that's such a critical connection point that needs to be embraced and explored. And yeah, I would just reiterate my support for that type of approach going forward.
For sure. And may I just interject that I also don't want to leave the impression that our peace officers who are regularly in these spaces, that they too don't have connection with these folks. They know many by name, and there is a lot of compassion and connection already happening there as well.
Right. Thank you for that. And then one of the things that really stuck out to me in the report, there was a quote from an individual talking about how being moved means no one knows where we are and we have to wait for services because we cannot be found. And I know when I've connected with houseless Edmontonians, this is exactly what I've heard firsthand. And I've heard of instances where folks have been basically bumped from housing lists because no one could find them after they were forced to move. And I'm wondering, how are we ensuring that we're not sort of inadvertently making it more challenging to find those housing connections or maintain those housing connections, like that integration work? How can we support that?
Thanks, Councillor Salvador. That's a great question. So I think that there's a few things there. First of all, when it comes to the low-risk encampments and the ERT, it is important to note that that's a situation table that meets weekly to review anyone that's been categorized as low-risk encampments, and extra care is taken to ensure that nobody is disconnected through a encampment closure if it's in that stream of work. The second broader point about more coordination, this is actually something that we've been looking at for some time, and we'll now have the opportunity, I think, to bring back some more information to committee on that, thanks to a motion that Councillor Tang made earlier this year after the HSOC conversation around outreach. I think there's an opportunity to talk about ways of improving the coordination and integration amongst those teams that would lead to better outcomes for clients also, who are for folks who get displaced, to move more towards that ultimate vision of like a no wrong door kind of approach. And so I think there's opportunity to do more. And then the third thing I'll just say is, the reason we have bridge housing is because of, as a reaction to this problem, is to try and provide a place for people to go while they're connected to the housing process, so that while they're getting their ID and getting set up with the apartments, they have a place to go. And so we've made some progress on that with the Northlands bridge housing, and hopefully there'll be opportunities in the future as well to continue to make progress on elevating and ensuring that there is more the need for bridge housing.
Okay, thank you for that. And yeah, I just think that integration, connection piece is just so critical. I really appreciate the framing of, yeah, no wrong door. I'm out of time. I had a few more questions, so I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to our 3:30 break, so we'll reconvene at 3:45 with the second round of questions. We're in recess. Thanks. Good afternoon. We'll now continue the Community and Public Services Committee meeting for October 11th and 14th. I'll start with a quick roll call of committee. Mayor Sohi.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Councillor Wright.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Councillor Tang.
Hello.
Hello. And Councillor Jans.
Good afternoon.
And good afternoon. And I know we're joined by a number of other councillors, but I'm not going to go through the roster again. You know who you are. So we'll continue with questions of administration. And I'm going to go first to Councillor Jans.
Thank you. I was just looking for clarity on whether we'll be reviewing the high risk, low risk, medium risk encampment portion. I understand some of the tension around tent clearing is that sometimes they're cleared because they're deemed higher risk. Am I offside here? Could we elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. I can elaborate on that. Yes. So when we look at an encampment and we evaluate risk, we look at categorizing that encampment based on observable criteria such as the presence of needles, propane tanks. We often find that areas are actually ones that have experienced fire already, as you can see from the damage to the surrounding environment, and other accelerants present in the encampment. Those are just a few of the many risk factors that we look at.
Yeah,
and
sorry,
then,
if I may, maybe what I would say then for feedback, I would support a review of this criteria in the coming work, because I think there's a number of cases where an encampment was cleared and then it's back up again in hours, if not days. So I would appreciate that. I also wanted confirmation. So this work that will be coming forward, it'll have certain, I think I overheard it'll have certain min specs, if you will, in terms of washrooms, water, kind of like access to water fountains, etc., or for kind of like what we were doing with shelter standards. Is that correct?
Councillor Jans, are you referring to the prototype next steps?
Yeah.
What we're doing right now is essentially sifting all the ideas. Some of these ideas we can just go ahead and do because they maybe align with public washroom standards, they align with minimum shelter standards. What we really want to dig into with the prototypes are the ideas where we're not certain whether they would work or not. So for example, one idea that came up across all the engagement streams was trauma-informed interactions. Encampment residents were interested in it, neighbors were interested in it, but what would that look like? Who would do the training? How would we know whether it was working for people? That's something that is ripe for prototyping because we don't have the answers. So the sifting of ideas will help us focus in on the prototypes where we need more exploration, and some of these other ideas, we can just go and run with them as part of service design and continuous improvement.
Okay, excellent. To my colleague's point, I did hear about, we were talking about drug use, and I hear the voice of one person who shared with me that when they were experiencing homelessness and they had nowhere to go, they would do meth and walk across the city back and forth because there was nowhere to go and they wanted to stay alert and stay safe that way. So as we talk about substance use, I think that talking about the circle, what's driving that usage and why people are choosing certain substances for certain reasons is great to keep front of mind. One piece I also want to look for in the prototypes, or maybe a prioritization of the prototypes, is around the youth homelessness piece. From talking to Youth Emergency Shelter and outdated language there. Yes, and other partners. The idea of a youth-specific strategy and seeing that prioritized in our prototypes, is that a possibility?
I think in terms of a youth strategy, I would defer to Crystal, but in terms of prototypes, as was mentioned even this morning, lived experience engagement is not a one and done. So even as we move into the prototypes and we think about who would be impacted, who really needs to be at the table, then we keep inviting more people. And so absolutely we can make the connection with yes.
Right. Many people experiencing homelessness do so for their first time in their teens, and also having a youth in care strategy for young people being discharged out of government care, and now even with less funding, I think that's going to be a a top priority. So I'd really like to see more about that too.
Yeah, and I think again, the venue for that is the community plan around ending homelessness. Under previous efforts and previous plans, there's been a youth-focused table that develops strategies specific to youth, and I think there's opportunity for a refresh of that through the new community plan that Homer Trust will lead on.
Yeah, I'm Councillor Cartmell was touching on this about sort of, and I'm paraphrasing, where sort of it may be very hard to get somebody out of homelessness who's been in and out for 20 years, but a young person who maybe is just in just an episodic situation, we could act faster and make better gains to help them really springboard into opportunities. So really interested in hearing more about that as we go forward, and it sounds like we need to put a bunch of money towards free footy. Thank you.
Councillor Tang.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm gonna dig into that prototyping stuff in my next round, but before I do that, I want to just understand a bit more about some of these findings, and including the preliminary insights from the MAPS work. And I think it's interesting that this report followed on the housing wonder from this morning. I've already pointed out that I think there is quite a bit of echoing of themes. And I'm wondering, does your design team plan to consider that framing of home capability and well-being present in that earlier report, but that I think is very much relevant in this conversation, along with some of those segments and opportunities in your encampment work? Without seeing the maps portion, I think it's really hard for me to understand some of those conversations. I can get a glimpse of it, but I'm wondering how, I guess my big question is, how does this, HCD work coincide and interact with the other one?
So our project team works really closely with Crystal's team. I would say it is an integrated approach, and we're constantly trying to build on what each other is doing. As we're moving into prototype, there's lots of lenses that we would want to use. We'd want to use the Recover Wellbeing framework. We would want to use what's been learned in the affordable housing engagement. We'd want to use equity lenses, and that's part of the sense making of the ideas, and then having those conversations with the people who actually gave us the ideas as well, to make sure we're hearing correctly what they're actually telling us.
And so the housing team has been able to share some of those segments and opportunity areas with the encampment team or the design team working on the encampment work. Yes?
Yeah, we got them last week and started digging into them.
Okay, great. And I think earlier one of the councillors brought up the Indigenous encampment team, and I'm also, so that's kind of coming together now, even though that was approved maybe a year ago. And then there's also the Indigenous housing piece, and I remember I still remember one of the things that surprised me from that work was that when it came to the notion of Indigenous-led shelter, in fact, a lot of the providers didn't necessarily kind of want to go there, or didn't feel that was the most viable option. And so I guess I'm wondering, how do you take that into kind of this work, and how will the Indigenous encampment team kind of come into this work? And the comments about the mutual aid, I think NECAM, one of the mutual aids or the only mutual aid group that you interacted with on this report, they spoke about them already doing some of that encampment cleanup work in the previous presentation. So I'm just trying to there's a lot of different threads. I'm just wondering, how can you pull that together for me?
Yeah, you're right, Councillor Tang. There's a bunch of different pieces intersecting. NICEM is under contract currently by the City of Edmonton to do work related to encampment cleanups, and so they're working with our parks folks on that. And that's sort of like I think a good sort of not test case or pilot, but like an example that we could potentially learn from and how to engage other mutual aid groups in work of the city. So we're obviously really interested in the outcome of that project. With respect to the outreach team, honestly, part of the challenge is we've been struggling to find an operator who wants to take the contract, and so, but we've made some strides there, I think, through going back and forth. And part of the challenge is that they want, a lot of people, a lot of the providers that we talk to want a holistic response. They don't like the piecemeal of like, okay, we'll only do outreach, because they know outreach like the best way to think of outreach is the one of the two front doors to the system, right, besides shelter. And if we can only offer a doorway, but there's no funding or budget for supports to make it an effective solution, often it's the same thing with the shelter conversation.
Yeah. Totally.
Groups feel challenged by that. So we're working through that and seeing how we can connect solutions to other solutions to try and provide more of that holistic response.
That's good. And so potentially, that piece about the Indigenous design and led encampment, there could potentially be a role for this provider that might start on the Indigenous encampment work, which is
potentially
without promising anything.
I mean, I think there's a lot of ideas that are often floated, but then when it comes to executing, whether somebody actually wants to lead on that or not is another question. But I think for sure we'll share this with, absolutely share all of this research. And often the groups that we talk to are the ones that inform us of the lived experience perspectives, right? Because they're working with them directly.
And just finally, for the journey maps that are to come, do you see them significantly further shaping those engagement results and even the prototype ideas? Or are those the ones that we're seeing?
Those journey maps are critical for us. So even though we're sifting some ideas now, we're not making any decisions about prototypes until we've really had time to digest what MAPS is developing.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mayor Sohi?
Thank you. The engagement that was facilitated with folks living in encampments, the 3 out of 4 participants identified as Indigenous. 87% of females staying outside were Indigenous. And while 2 in 3 Indigenous participants had personally experienced residential schools, day school, or foster care system, almost all had relatives or friends with this experience, right? And that speaks to the reality of how Indigenous peoples are impacted. Yes, we are shifting our focus to Indigenous-led shelters, transitional housing, supportive housing. Just what I'm trying to understand, this is the question I've been posing ever since I got here, don't we need kind of a radical shift in that we need to get going on it? Yes. And we also been, this is frustrating as well, that I have, or sense, we always been in this reactive mode because we are trying to react to the situation. So I just want to get, when do we kind of say, okay, well, this is not working, or not working to the extent, I'm sorry if I know, we're achieving some results, right? But not to the extent that we are making transformational change, right? So at what time we take a pause and say, well, we need to look differently.